Good morning, everyone. Today we're back with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. Last time we finished at page 57 on the 5th chapter called The Fallen Warrior. Well, let's continue. Fly, supplied Harry. I saw him too. He came after Hagrid and me. So that's why he left to follow you, said Hazel. I couldn't understand why he'd vanished, but what made him change targets? Harry behaved a little too kindly to stand in a Shumpike, said Lupin. Stan? Repeated Hermione. But I thought he was in Azkaban. Kingsley let out a mirthless laugh. Hermione, there's obviously been a mass breakout which the Ministry has hushed up. Travers' hood fell off when I cursed him. He's supposed to be inside too. But what happened to you, Remus? Where's George? He lost an ear, said Lupin. Lost Anne? Repeated Hermione in a high voice. Snape's work, said Lupin. Snape! Shouted Harry. You didn't say... He lost his hood during the chase. Septim Central was always a special ability of Snape's. I wish I could say I'd paid him back in a kind, but it was losing so much blood. Silence fell between the four of them as they looked up at the sky. There were no signs of movements. The stars stared back, unblinking, indifferent, unobserved by flying friends. Where was Ron? Where was Fred and Mr. Weasley? Where were Bill, Fleur, Tonks, Mad-Eye, and Mundungus? Harry, give us a hand, called Hagrid hoarsely from the door in which he was stuck again. Glad of something to do, Harry pulled him free, then headed through the empty kitchen and back into the sitting room, where Mrs. Weasley and Ginny was still tending to George. Mrs. Weasley had staunched his bleeding now, and by the lamp light, Harry saw a clean, gaping hole where George's ear had been. How is he? Mrs. Weasley looked around and said, I can't make it grow back, not when it's been removed by dark magic. But it could have been so much worse. He's alive. Yes, said Harry. Thank God. Did I hear someone else in the yard? Ginny asked. Hermione and Kingsley, said Harry. Thank goodness, Ginny whispered. They looked at each other. Harry wanted to hug her, hold on to her. He did not even care much that Mrs. Weasley was there. But before he could act on the impulse, there was a great crash from the kitchen. I'll prove who I am, Kingsley, after I've seen my son. Now back off if you know what's good for you. Harry had ever heard Mr. Weasley shout like that before. He burst into the living room, his bald patch gleaming with sweat, his spectacles askew. Fred right behind him, both pale but uninjured. Arthur, sobbed Mrs. Weasley. Oh, thank goodness. How is he? Mr. Weasley dropped to his knees beside George. For the first time since Hammond had known him, Fred seemed to be lost for words. He gaped over the back of the sofa at his twins, a wound as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Perhaps roused by the sound of Fred and their father's arrival, George stirred. How do you feel, Georgie? Whispered Mrs. Weasley. George's finger groped for the side of his head. Saint-like, he murmured. What's wrong with him? Croaked Fred, looking terrified. Is his mind affected? Saint-like, repeated George, opening his eyes and looking up at his brother. You see, I'm Holly. Holly, Fred. Get it? Mrs. Weasley sobbed harder than ever. Color flooded Fred's pale face. Pathetic, he told George. Pathetic. But the whole wild world with the ear-related humor before you. You go for Holly? Ah, well, said George, grinning at his tear-soaked mother. You'll be able to tell us apart now, anyway, Mum. He looked around. Hi, Harry. You are Harry, right? Yeah, I am, said Harry, moving closer to the sofa. Well, at least we got you back, okay, said George. Why aren't Ron and Bill huddled around my sickbed? They're not back yet, George, said Mrs. Weasley. George's grin faded. Harry glanced at Ginny and motioned to her to accompany him back outside. As they walked through the kitchen, she said in a low voice, Ron and Tonks should be back by now. They didn't have a long journey. Aunt Mario's not that far from here. Harry said nothing. He had been trying to keep fear at bay since reaching the burrow, but now it enveloped him, seeming to crawl over his skin, throbbing in his chest, clogging his throat. As they walked down the back steps to the dark yard, Ginny took his hand. Kingsley was striding backwards and forwards, glancing up at the sky every time he turned. Harry was reminded of Uncle Vernon pacing the living room a million years ago. Hagrid, Hermione, and Lupin stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing upwards in silence. None of them looked around when Harry and Ginny joined the violent vigil. The minutes stretched into what might as well have been years. The slightest breath of wind made them all jump and turn towards the whispering bush or tree in the hope that one of the missing order members might leave unscathed from its leaves. And then a broom materialized directly above them and streaked towards the ground. "It's them!" squeaked Hermione. Tonks landed in a long skid that sent earth and pebbles everywhere. "Remus!" Tonks cried as she staggered off the broom into Lupin's arm. His face was set and white. He seemed unable to speak. Ron tripped dazedly towards Harry and Hermione. "You okay?" he mumbled, before Hermione flew at him and hugged him tightly. I thought, all right," said Ron, patting her on the back. "I'm fine." "Ron was great," said Tonks warmly, relinquishing her hold on the Lupin. "Wonderful, stunned one of the Death Eaters straight to the head. And when you're aiming at a moving target from a flying room, you did?" said Harry, gazing up at Ron with her arm still around his neck. Almost the tone of surprise, he said a little grumpily, breaking free. "Are we the last back?" "No," said Ginny. "We're still waiting for Bill and Flo and Mad-Eye and Mundungus. I'm going to tell Mom and Dad you're okay, Ron." She ran back inside. "So what kept you? What happened?" Lupin sounded almost angry at Tonks. "Bellatrix," said Tonks. She wants me quite as much as she wants Harry, Remus. She tried very hard to kill me. I just wish I'd got her. I owe Bellatrix, but we definitely injured Rodolphus. Then we got to Ron's Auntie Muriel and we missed our portkey and she was fussing over us. A muscle was jumping in Lupin's jaw. He nodded, but seemed unable to say anything else. "So what happened to you lot?" Tonks asked, returning to Harry and Hermione and Kingsley. They recounted the stories of their own journey, but all the time the continued events of Bill, Flo, and Mad-Eye and Mundungus seemed to lie upon them like a frost. Its eyes seemed bite harder and harder to ignore. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, guys. And I hope you enjoyed it, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye. Yes, don't like to subscribe, and hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Bye.